When I first spotted the "Help Wanted" sign in the window of the old puppet shop on Maple Street, I was immediately intrigued. The sign was handwritten in elegant cursive on aged parchment, giving it an air of mystery. As a college student studying anthropology, I was always drawn to the unusual and the arcane. Plus, I needed a part-time job to cover my living expenses, and this seemed like the perfect opportunity. The shop itself, Marionette Mystique, looked like something out of a different era. The exterior was adorned with intricate wood carvings, and the large display window showcased an array of puppets, some whimsical, others eerily lifelike. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the storefront, making the place seem both inviting and foreboding. I hesitated for a moment before pushing open the heavy oak door. A tiny bell jingled overhead, announcing my arrival. Inside, the scent of old wood, varnish, and something else, something earthy and ancient, filled the air. Puppets of all shapes and sizes hung from the ceiling and lined the shelves, their glass eyes seeming to follow me as I moved deeper into the shop. "Hello?" I called out tentatively. From behind a crimson velvet curtain at the back of the shop, a tall, slender man emerged. He had sharp features, piercing blue eyes, and silver hair slicked back neatly. Dressed in a tailored black suit with a burgundy vest, he looked like a character from a Victorian novel. "Good afternoon," he said with a warm smile. "Welcome to Marionette Mystique. How may I assist you?" "Hi," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "I saw the Help Wanted sign in the window and was wondering if the position is still available." "Ah, yes," he said, his eyes lighting up. "We are indeed seeking assistance. My name is Mr. Ainsworth." "And you are Emily Carter," I replied, extending my hand. He took it gently, his grip cool and firm. "A pleasure to meet you, Emily." As we spoke, I couldn't help but notice the elaborate marionette in a glass case near the register. It was exquisitely crafted, dressed in ornate clothing that seemed almost regal. Its eyes were made of some gemstone that caught the light in a mesmerizing way. "Do you have experience with puppets?" Mr. Ainsworth asked, drawing my attention back to him. "Not directly," I admitted, "but I've worked in retail and have a background in anthropology. I'm fascinated by cultural artifacts and storytelling traditions." "Anthropology, you say?" he mused. "How delightful. Puppetry is an ancient art form rich with cultural significance. I'm sure you'll find much to interest you here." "I hope so," I said sincerely. "Excellent," he replied. "The position involves managing the shop in the evenings, assisting customers, and tending to our collection. There are some unique aspects to this establishment that you'll need to be aware of." "Unique aspects?" I echoed. "Indeed," he said, his expression turning serious. "There are specific guidelines you must follow while working here. They are essential for your safety and the well-being of the shop." He reached into his vest pocket and produced a folded piece of parchment, handing it to me. The paper was thick and felt oddly warm to the touch. Unfolding it carefully, I read the following: "Rules for employment at Marionette Mystique. Arrive promptly at 6 p.m. and leave no later than midnight. Do not stay after hours under any circumstances. Never touch the marionette in the glass case near the register. Do not look directly into its eyes. If you hear whispering coming from the storage room, ignore it. Do not, under any circumstances, enter the room after 9 p.m. Do not respond to anyone calling your name from outside the front door after closing time. Keep all mirrors in the shop covered with the provided cloths after sunset. Should a puppet fall from its shelf or hook, return it to its place immediately and apologize. Do not use your own name while inside the shop. If a customer asks for your name, provide a false one. If the music box on the counter starts playing by itself, wind it down until it stops. Do not listen to the melody." I looked up at Mr. Ainsworth, a mixture of confusion and apprehension on my face. "Is this some kind of joke?" I asked hesitantly. "Not at all," he replied calmly. "I realize the rules may seem peculiar, but they are of the utmost importance." "Why?" I pressed. He studied me for a moment before answering. "This shop is special. The puppets here are not mere objects. They have histories, spirits tied to them. The rules help maintain harmony and ensure your safety." I glanced around the shop again. The puppets, with their lifelike features and intricate designs, suddenly seemed more ominous. "Has anyone ever broken the rules?" I asked. He sighed softly. "Unfortunately, yes. The consequences were undesirable." A chill ran down my spine. "What happened?" "It's best not to dwell on past misfortunes," he said gently. "Will you accept the position?" I hesitated. The rational part of me wanted to walk away, but another part, the curious, adventurous part, was intrigued. "Yes," I finally said. "I accept." "Splendid," Mr. Ainsworth said, a hint of relief in his eyes. "You may start tomorrow evening. Remember, the rules are there for your protection." As I left the shop, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just stepped into a storybook, one that could either be a grand adventure or a cautionary tale. The next evening, I arrived at the shop promptly at 6 p.m. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the street. Mr. Ainsworth greeted me at the door. "Welcome back, Emily," he said. "Or should I say, welcome to your first night." "Thank you," I replied, stepping inside. He spent the next hour showing me the ropes, how to operate the antique cash register, the proper way to handle the puppets, and the layout of the shop. He also introduced me to the small library at the back, filled with books on puppetry, folklore, and various esoteric subjects. "Feel free to read these during your downtime," he said. "Knowledge is a valuable companion here." "I appreciate that," I replied, genuinely excited about the collection. As the clock struck 7 p.m., Mr. Ainsworth prepared to leave. "Remember to cover all the mirrors after sunset," he reminded me, gesturing to the black cloths neatly folded on a shelf. "I will," I assured him. "And one more thing," he added, his expression serious. "Do not forget any of the rules." "I won't," I promised. With a nod, he exited the shop, leaving me alone. For the first hour, everything was quiet. A few customers came in, a middle-aged woman looking for a gift for her niece, a young man fascinated by marionettes. I assisted them, using the false name Amelia, as per rule number 7. At 8:30 p.m., I began covering the mirrors. As I draped the cloth over the largest mirror near the entrance, I thought I saw a flicker of movement behind me. Turning quickly, I found nothing out of the ordinary. "Just nerves," I muttered to myself. By 9 p.m., the shop was empty. The street outside had quieted down, and the soft glow of the street lights filtered through the front windows. I decided to explore the library, eager to delve into some of the ancient texts. I selected a book titled The Spirit Within, Animism and Artifacts, settling into a plush armchair. The book was fascinating, discussing the belief that objects, particularly handcrafted ones, could house spirits or energies. As I read, I became aware of a faint whispering sound. It was so soft that at first I thought it was my imagination. But as I strained to listen, it became clearer, a chorus of hushed voices emanating from the direction of the storage room. Rule number 3. If you hear whispering coming from the storage room, ignore it. Do not, under any circumstances, enter the room after 9 p.m. I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. Closing the book, I tried to refocus my attention elsewhere. I busied myself with organizing the shelves, humming softly to drown out the whispers. Suddenly, there was a thud behind me. I turned to see that one of the puppets, a jester, with a mischievous grin, had fallen from its hook. Rule number 6. Should a puppet fall from its shelf or hook, return it to its place immediately and apologize. I approached the puppet cautiously, picking it up gently. "I'm sorry," I said aloud, placing it back on its hook. As I stepped back, the puppet's head tilted ever so slightly, its glass eyes seeming to meet mine. I blinked, and it was as before. Shaking off the unease, I glanced at the clock. 10:15 p.m., just an hour and 45 minutes to go. I returned to the front counter and noticed that the music box, the one Mr. Ainsworth had warned me about, was slightly open. Before I could react, it began to play on its own, a haunting melody that was both beautiful and unsettling. Rule number 8. If the music box on the counter starts playing by itself, wind it down until it stops. Do not listen to the melody. I reached over and carefully wound the key in the opposite direction, silencing the tune. Despite my efforts, the melody lingered in my mind, echoing softly. A sudden knock on the front door startled me. Peering through the glass, I saw a figure standing outside, a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, wearing a pale dress. "Amelia," she called softly, her voice muffled. My heart skipped a beat. Rule number 4. Do not respond to anyone calling your name from outside the front door after closing time. I remained silent, stepping back from the door. "Amelia, please let me in," the girl pleaded, her eyes wide and imploring. I felt a pang of sympathy, but reminded myself that I wasn't actually Amelia. "You're not real," I whispered to myself. The girl's expression shifted, her eyes darkening. "Emily," she said, her voice lower. "I know you're in there." A chill ran through me. How did she know my real name? I backed away further, accidentally bumping into a display. The puppets swayed gently, their strings tangling. "Let me in," the girl shouted, her voice distorted. I closed my eyes tightly, willing the apparition to disappear. After a tense few moments, the knocking ceased. I opened my eyes to find the doorway empty. Taking a deep breath, I tried to steady myself. The clock showed 11 o'clock p.m., just one more hour. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, though I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. When midnight finally arrived, I locked up the shop and hurried home, the events of the night replaying in my mind. Over the next week, the occurrences became more frequent and intense. The whispers grew louder, the puppets seemed to move on their own, and the music box played almost nightly. One evening, as I was covering the last mirror, I caught a glimpse of something unsettling, a shadowy figure standing behind me. I spun around, but the shop was empty. Curiosity and fear battled within me. Part of me wanted to uncover the secrets of the shop, while another part urged caution. I decided to confront Mr. Ainsworth. "Mr. Ainsworth, may I ask you something?" I began during one of our brief overlaps. "Certainly," he replied, arranging some new arrivals on a shelf. "These incidents that keep happening, the whispers, the apparitions, what are they?" He paused, considering his words. "As I mentioned before, the shop is special. It serves as a conduit between realms." "Realms?" I echoed. "You mean like the spirit world?" "Precisely," he said. "The puppets here are vessels, housing energies and spirits from beyond." "Is that even safe?" I asked, incredulous. "It can be," he said carefully, "as long as the rules are followed. But why me? Why hire someone without explaining all this?" He looked at me with a hint of sadness. "'Cause the shop chooses who it wants, and it chose you." I didn't know how to respond to that. "Emily," he continued gently, "I understand that this is overwhelming. If you wish to leave, I won't stop you." I thought about it. Part of me wanted to walk away and never look back. But another part, the inquisitive scholar, was drawn to the mystery. "I'll stay," I said finally, "but I need to know more." He nodded solemnly. "Very well, but knowledge comes with its own risks." That night I decided to delve deeper. After closing, I retrieved some of the older books from the library, searching for anything that could explain the phenomena. One tome, bound in worn leather, caught my eye. The Veil Between Worlds, a treatise on spiritual gateways. I pored over its pages, learning about places and objects that served as bridges between the physical world and the spiritual realm. It spoke of rituals, bindings, and the dangers of meddling with forces beyond comprehension. As I read, the whispers began again, more insistent than ever. "Emily," they called. "Join us." I felt a pull, a seductive lure that tugged at my consciousness. Rule number 3. If you hear whispering coming from the storage room, ignore it. Do not, under any circumstances, enter the room after 9 p.m. It was well past 9 p.m., but I felt compelled to investigate. Grabbing a lantern, I approached the storage room door. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a tempest. "Emily, we need you." My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. "Stop!" a voice shouted from behind me. I turned to see Mr. Ainsworth, his face etched with urgency. "What are you doing?" he demanded. I need to know," I stammered. He shook his head gravely. "You must not open that door." "Why? What's in there?" He sighed deeply. "Spirits that have not found peace. They are trapped, and they seek to escape into our world." "Can't we help them?" I asked. "It's not that simple," he replied. "Their release would bring imbalance and chaos." "Then why keep them here at all?" He looked away. "Because someone must guard the gateway." "Is that what you're doing?" I pressed. "Guarding it?" "Yes," he admitted, "and it's a burden I've carried for many years." "Let me help," I offered. He shook his head. "It's too dangerous." "I'm already involved," I argued. "They know my name. They call to me." He studied me intently. Perhaps you are meant to be here, Tom." "Meaning what?" "Meaning that the shop chose you for a reason," he said. "Maybe it's time for me to pass on the responsibility." I was taken aback. "You're suggesting that I become the guardian?" He nodded slowly. "With guidance, you could succeed me." I felt a mix of fear and excitement. What would that entail? Learning the rituals, understanding the balance between realms, and most importantly, maintaining the rules. I considered his words. What happens if we don't? He hesitated before answering. Then the barrier weakens, and the spirits can cross over freely. "Has that ever happened before?" "Once," he said quietly. "A long time ago." "What happened?" He looked pained. "I lost someone dear to me." "I'm sorry," I said softly. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "I don't want you to face the same loss." I met his gaze. "If I can help prevent that, then I want to try." He smiled faintly. "Very well. We begin tomorrow." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of learning and discovery. Mr. Ainsworth taught me about the history of the shop, the rituals needed to maintain the barrier, and the true nature of the puppets. Each puppet, he explained, was a vessel for a spirit, some benign, others malevolent. The marionette in the glass case in particular housed a powerful entity that sought to break free. "That's why you must never look into its eyes," he cautioned. "It can enthrall you, bending your will to its purpose." I listened intently, absorbing as much as I could. We performed rituals together, chants in ancient languages, and offerings to appease restless spirits. One evening, as we were preparing for a particularly important ritual, Mr. Ainsworth grew pale and clutched his chest. "Are you all right?" I asked, concerned. He shook his head weakly. "I'm afraid my time is shorter than I thought." "What do you mean?" He took a labored breath. "I've been ill for some time. The strain of guarding the gateway has taken its toll. I felt a surge of panic. What will happen if you can't continue? He met my eyes. You must take over, Emily. You're ready. I'm not sure that I am, I protested. You are, he insisted. Believe in yourself. Before I could respond, he collapsed. Mr. Ainsworth, I cried, catching him as he fell. I called for an ambulance, but by the time they arrived, it was too late. In the days following his death, I was consumed by grief and uncertainty. The responsibility of guarding the gateway now rested solely on me. The shop seemed different without him, darker, heavier. I continued to perform the rituals as he had taught me, but something felt off. One night, as I was closing up, the whispers returned, more insistent and aggressive than before. Emily, you can't stop us. The lights flickered and a cold wind swept through the shop, extinguishing the candles. I hurried to relight them, reciting the protective chants, but the shadows deepened. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. The puppets were turning their heads, their eyes following me. Join us, Emily, they whispered in unison. My heart pounded in my chest. Leave me alone, I shouted. A sinister laugh echoed through the shop. You're alone now, a voice taunted. You can't contain us. I realized with horror that the barrier was failing. Desperate, I retrieved the ancient tome from the library, searching for a solution. Flipping through the pages, I found a ritual that Mr. Ainsworth hadn't taught me, a binding spell that could reinforce the barrier, but at great personal risk. I didn't have a choice. Gathering the necessary items, candles, herbs, a ceremonial dagger, I began the ritual in the center of the shop. As I chanted, the shadows swirled around me, figures forming within them. They reached out, tendrils of darkness attempting to disrupt the ritual. I held firm, focusing my intent. By the light within and the strength of will, I bind thee, I recited, drawing the dagger across my palm. Blood dripped onto the floor, mingling with the herbs. The spirits shrieked in anger, the sound piercing and disorienting. Then yield, I commanded. A blinding light emanated from the circle, pushing the shadows back. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a soft voice spoke. Thank you. I opened my eyes to see the spirits dissolving, their forms becoming ethereal. Rest now, I whispered. As the last of them faded, the shop returned to normal. Exhausted, I sank to the floor. The next morning, I awoke to sunlight streaming through the windows. I was still on the floor of the shop, but everything felt different, lighter, peaceful. I stood up, wincing at the sting in my palm. The cut had healed, leaving only a faint scar. A gentle breeze rustled through the open door, carrying the scent of fresh flowers. Stepping outside, I found a small bouquet of white lilies on the doorstep. Attached was a note in elegant handwriting. Your sacrifice is acknowledged. Balance is restored. I smiled softly, a sense of accomplishment and serenity washing over me. In the weeks that followed, the shop flourished. Customers came in droves, drawn by the unique charm and warmth that now permeated the space. I continued to care for the puppets, but the eerie occurrences had ceased. One day, a man entered the shop, a traveler with kind eyes and a friendly smile. Welcome to Marionette Mystique, I greeted him. Thank you, he replied, glancing around appreciatively. This place has quite the aura. Are you a collector? I asked. Of sorts, he said cryptically. I'm looking for something special. Perhaps I can help, I offered. He studied me thoughtfully. You carry a great responsibility. I was taken aback. Excuse me? He smiled knowingly. The guardianship. It's not an easy burden. How do you know about that? I asked cautiously. I've walked a similar path, he said. My name is Gabriel. Emily, I introduced myself. It's a pleasure, he said. I wanted to offer my assistance, should you need it. Why? I asked, skeptical. Because places like this need protectors, he explained, and protectors need allies. I considered his offer. What kind of assistance? Guidance, knowledge, perhaps even friendship, he said. I felt a connection, a sense of understanding. I appreciate that. He nodded. Then it settled. Over the next few months, Gabriel became a trusted confidant. He shared stories of his own experiences with the supernatural, and together we worked to strengthen the shop's defenses. I learned that there were others like us, guardians of various gateways and nexuses around the world. It's important to maintain the balance, Gabriel explained one evening as we sat in the library. If one gateway falters, it can have ripple effects elsewhere. I never realized how interconnected everything is, I mused. He smiled. It's a vast and mysterious world. One day, a young woman entered the shop, looking somewhat lost. Welcome to Marionette Mystique, I greeted her. Hi, she said shyly. I saw the Help Wanted sign and was wondering if the position is still available. I glanced at the sign in the window, surprised. I didn't remember putting it there. What's your name? I asked. Sarah, she replied. I felt a familiar sensation, a tingling that hinted at something more. Tell me, Sarah, I began. Do you believe in the extraordinary? She looked thoughtful. I've always been drawn to the unexplained, she admitted. There's so much more to the world than what we see. I smiled warmly. Perhaps you might be just the person we're looking for. As I showed her around the shop, I felt a sense of déjà vu. The cycle was beginning anew, but this time I was in Mr. Ainsworth's shoes. I handed her a folded parchment. There are some important rules you'll need to follow. She read them carefully, her eyes widening slightly. This is different. I won't lie to you, I said gently. This place is special, and there are responsibilities that come with it. She met my gaze. I think I'd like to be a part of it. Welcome aboard, I said, extending my hand. As she shook it, I felt a sense of hope. Together, we would continue the legacy, guarding the balance and embracing the mysteries that came our way. Years passed, and the shop thrived under our care. We expanded the library, hosted workshops on puppetry and folklore, and built a community of like-minded individuals. Gabriel introduced us to others in the network of guardians, and we forged alliances that strengthened our resolve. One evening, as the sun set and the shop was bathed in a warm glow, I sat reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The challenges had been great, but so had the rewards. Lost in thought? Gabriel asked, joining me. Just appreciating how far we've come, I replied. He nodded. You've done remarkable things, Emily. Thank you, I said sincerely. I couldn't have done it without you. He smiled. Perhaps one day you'll pass on your knowledge to another. I looked over at Sarah, who was assisting a customer with genuine enthusiasm. Perhaps, I agreed. As the last customer left and we prepared to close up, I felt a sense of contentment. Ready? Sarah asked, gathering the cloths to cover the mirrors. Yes, I said. Let's begin. We moved through the shop, performing the rituals that had become second nature. The puppets seemed to watch with approval, their silent presence a comforting constant. As we finished, I gazed at the marionette in the glass case. Its eyes no longer held malice, but a serene acceptance. Good night, I whispered. Turning off the lights, we stepped outside, locking the door behind us. The night air was crisp, the stars shining brightly above. See you tomorrow, Sarah said cheerfully. Good night, I replied. As I walked home, I felt at peace. The journey had been long and fraught with peril, but it had led me to a place of purpose and belonging, and for that, I was grateful.